I'm just gonna click start. I'm gonna stop the recording. Or I'm gonna welcome everyone. It is such a privilege and honor to be here on behalf of the Berkeley Law Muslim Student Association. I want to thank you all for being here for this special event. Special thank you first to God to our co-sponsors, the American Constitutional Society, the Women of Color Collective, PALSA, the Middle Eastern and North African Law Student Association, to Naja, Humayun, and Walid Vora, whose work behind the scenes from the MSA was huge, films distributors at SCX Entertainment and NBC Universal for helping make this happen, and the staff that helped us get ready for this. I want to begin briefly by sharing a 30-second trailer from the film and its upcoming media release. And after that, I'll introduce our guests and then we'll begin discussion. So let me know if anyone has issues hearing the sound here. Oh. One moment, please.
You want to represent the head recruiter for 9/11.
He's been held for years without a single charge being laid against him.
There's no evidence. I am innocent.
Maybe he's guilty.
Maybe he is.
You miss something. This guy goes home.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
This extraordinarily brilliant woman who is defending him and really came to love him. And the real human beings are actually on set while we're shooting the film.
I've never been part of a conspiracy, but this is what it must feel like to be on the outside of it.
You need to tell me what happened to you. I can't defend you.
You asked me to set fire to this place, but I'm still sitting in it.
All right.
Hola. Kevin, look, I have an interview right now. I call you after the interview.
All right, everybody. It is my honor to invite our three guests. I believe Mohamedeu will be joining us shortly after. Nancy Hollander is an internationally recognized criminal defense lawyer whose clients include Mohamedeu Slahi, Chelsea Manning. She also represents Abid Rahim al-Nashri, who is still in Guantanamo and is facing the death penalty. Her practice has largely been devoted to representing individuals and organizations accused of crimes, including those involving national security issues in trial and appeal. Kevin MacDonald is an Academy Award-winning director whose films include One Day in September, Marley, State of Play, and The Last King of Scotland. He's the director of the film The Mauritanian, which is a feature film adaptation of Mohamedeu Slahi's diary. And Mohamedeu, who hopefully will be joining us in a few moments, is an author, former Guantanamo detainee. He was detained at Guantanamo Bay detention camp without charge for 14 years, during which he was subjected to severe torture. His book, The Guantanamo Diary, is the first and only memoir by a still imprisoned Guantanamo detainee, was published in January 2015 and became an international bestseller. No charges were ever filed against him during or after this ordeal. He will be speaking to us from his home country of Mauritania. We'll be having a discussion and plan on doing a question and answer around halfway through the event. So I wanted to begin by asking you both a little bit about how this all came together. Was it challenging to get a film made about this story, given the subject matter, how unflattering it is to the United States, how difficult some of these topics are? And were you, Nancy, or ever nervous? And why a film and not a documentary or another way to tell the story?
I'll go first. I represented Mohamedeu from 2005 on. Yes, it was difficult. It was difficult because we had a lot of trouble getting the information, the discovery from the government. We had to fight to get it. We were lucky in some ways because we got Mohamedeu's medical records pretty early on, and that corroborated what he said. He said it had broken ribs, for example, and it showed it on the medical records. We really needed to prove the torture, and then we needed to deal with all of these government claims against him and the false confessions. Why a movie? Early on, before Mohamedou got out in 2015, his book came out, and shortly I had to sign the contract for 27 different languages for this book. And then shortly after that, two producers, Lloyd Levin and Bay 11, came to see me, and my co-counsel, Terry Duncan, came to Albuquerque and said they wanted to do this movie. And we said yes, because a lot more people will see a movie than read a book. And frankly, a lot more people will see a movie that's fictionalized than will see a documentary. So we wanted this story out. We wanted it to get Mohamedou out. He got out first, and now we wanted to get the other 40 out of Guantanamo. Kevin, it's your turn.
Well, Mohamedou's here. Maybe he should talk about this subject. Do you want to ask him the question?
Salam Mohammed, our question is just to tell a little bit how this came together. Was it challenging? Were you nervous at all? And why did you want to make a film to tell your story?
Like through the movie? You know, once only get better. And, you know, they say that democracy dies in darkness. And this whole operation of kidnapping, you know, dragged me around the world, 20,000 miles, more than 20,000 miles, you know, first to Jordan. It happened in darkness. Through Europe, it happened in darkness. And from Jordan to Afghanistan, not my family, not my lawyer, not even my embassy in Jordan. And the operation was all in darkness. And I just decided I want light. I want the whole world to know about my story, you know, and because this needs to stop, as this, like treating African people and Middle Eastern people outside the rule of law needs to stop. King Leopold of Belgium went into the Congo in 1884, something like that. And he committed atrocities much more in volume and in humanity than Hitler. Hitler is evil in the West. I agree with the West. But King Leopold is almost a hero. They have his statue, you know, in the city of, you know, in Belgium, because he killed African people. He committed the atrocious crime against African people. And I want the world to understand that we want the same thing as you, Muhsin, wants. We want to enjoy the same freedom as you. We don't want to be kidnapped. We want to have big mouth and not be kidnapped because of a big mouth. We want to be able to support even unpopular causes and not being dragged. You know, this is just another way to tell my story, and I'm very happy about it. And if there are other ways, I will tell my story too.
Kevin?
Well, just to talk more practically about the film, yes, it was very hard to get this film made. It was made pretty cheaply for a Hollywood type production. It was a $13 million movie, But in order to get that money, we needed stars and stars and stars, a lot of stars in this movie, and they all did it very much for the love of the story, for the love of Mohamedou, and but even still, it was difficult to get anyone to come up with the money. I think that you know, for me, the motivation to make this movie was partly the same as Mohamedou's, which is to shed light on an area which the American government, for understandable reasons, has tried to keep in darkness. But for me, it was also just very simply about telling a human story, humanizing Mohamedou as a representative of the many, many other prisoners in Guantanamo. In a way, we could have made a story about any of them or many of them, and they would be very different stories. But Mohamedou happens to have written about his. He's written beautifully about it. He's an artist in his own right. He's a writer. He's, as you've just heard, very articulate and very intelligent. So he was a good subject, and also very funny as a man. So he was a very good subject for a film as a character.
Given your experience either trying to recreate it for the film or representing Mohamedou or being at Guantanamo Bay, particularly in the United States, what do you think the biggest misunderstanding the public has about Guantanamo Bay and the detention center there is?
Nancy, do you want to take that?
First of all, most people think it's closed. People I encounter, I always talk about it. You know, until COVID, I flew around a lot. When Mohamedou's book came out, they arranged for me to be at the airport in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where my office is, to sell books. I'm a pretty good salesperson, actually. And I was there selling Mohamedou's books. And a woman came up to me and said, well, they're all Cubans, right? Like, no understanding at all. People don't believe there's torture. People believe it's closed, or they believe everyone who's there is a terrorist, whatever that means to them. And that anyone who gets out is a terrorist. And sorry about the sirens. And I always have to say, you know, President Bush released 500 people, 500. So who is it you're calling a terrorist? Those 500 that he released, Bush, who's, you know, your favorite, usually these are Republicans. Democrats are horrified about it, but don't know about it. And as Mohamedou said, we need to bring it into the light. What we hope this movie will do, it's a beautiful movie. We have Kevin to thank for making such an inspirational movie that's also a thriller that people want to see. And for Tahar Rahim and the other actors for their magnificent performance. We want this to start the conversation again. Start the conversation about Guantanamo. Maybe that will also start the conversation about the black sites. We've just found out that we can go forward with our International Criminal Court case, which I have for my other client. The whole purpose is to bring things into the light. And maybe then the light gets even broader. You know, you didn't mention that I represented the Holy Land Foundation and Shukri Abu Bakr, who's doing 65 years for providing charity for children. We have to change what people think, so people aren't thinking of whole groups of people as being guilty. There are people who probably think now, because of Mohamedou, that everyone in Mauritania is guilty, if they even know where it is, which most don't. But it's light. It's all about, Mohamedou's right. It's all about bringing it into the light, being able to start the conversation like we're doing here, so more people will know about it.
Do either of you want to answer the question as well? If not, we can move on. So one thing that we rarely discuss in secular environments like law school is the role of faith and religion in our lives. But it's such a central part of the story here. Mohamedeu, in the film, as well as the diary that he wrote, through the worst moments of torture, is constantly talking about how he's praying, he's reciting Quran. Given that Guantanamo exclusively comprised of Muslim men, how do you think that shaped his and other detainees' experience, both in terms of the Islamophobia experience, but also in the strength drawn from faith in dark moments?
That sounds like one for you,
Excuse
Mohamedou.
me?
I think for you.
I
Any of
thought it
you-
was for Nancy.
No, these questions
Well,
are for.
No.
They're for all of us, but let me just say.
But I
very
think
quickly,
you're best qualified to answer that
Yes,
as the only
yes,
Muslim of the
as
three
the
of
only
us.
Muslim of all of us, right? Of me and Kevin, right?
I don't know how to answer the question. I mean, your upbringing, your upbringing plays a very big role in how you act. And I say this, without cosmetic. I'm the victim of my the United States people. I didn't know them. I didn't know how they act. I have only like two very contrasting images. I grew up in a military dictatorship. And then I moved to Germany. I was very young, a teenager. And then I saw the rule of law. And then I suddenly discovered that people have mouth. They can speak. And they can make demands to their government. And so I thought the United States is like Germany because the leader of the free world. But I was so ignorant. First, Americans are very religious. I did not know that, I never knew that Jesus Christ was born in Alabama before I went to Guantanamo Bay. And it was like, I discussed with her religion, and so she told me how bad Muslims are. And Muhsin, I guess your name suggests that you have same background as me, just based on the name. And this is very stereotypical, but anyway. And I was discussing with one of my interrogators, Amy, and she told me that I'm a very bad person, for many reasons, but principally because I was a Muslim. Then I laughed. I said, look, but I'm going to heaven. He said, no, you are not going to hell. And I said, and you going to heaven? She said, yes, because she's a good Christian. I said, but that is so unfair because I'm suffering just like Jesus Christ did. And you are not suffering. You have a very good job. You make a lot of money and you go to the T case. That is where they sleep. And you much fun. To heaven, where is justice? And then she said, that's the way it is. And I said, okay, I know children in Africa are neither Muslim nor Christian, but their children, would they go also to hell? She said, yes, if they don't get baptized. So this is all like a cultural shock to me. And I was enjoying it because I really like controversy. And then I said, but those Africans, they go also to hell? She said, yes, because they are not baptized. I said, but they didn't have a chance to go to the greatest country of the world, the United States of America, and meet your pastor, and they get converted, they get, so this is a very long story, but it was a lot of fun. And faith is very important to me but my faith developed. So I that the good things happen to you. If you do bad things happen to you. But I discovered this is not true, because life is much more complicated. And then I have had to adjust my faith. And then ironically, when my faith was very shaken, very shaken, even I doubted my faith, everything. But I came out with like a more open-minded, vision to my faith and so, and this made my faith much stronger and much more resilient in face of all these troubles that I went through. Very long answer, and I don't like it.
Well, let me
Thank
say
you.
this from a different perspective.
so
Can I say something
Kevin,
from a different
I have a
perspective?
question.
Oh, I guess
Oh,
not.
for sure. Mhm.
Yeah, just from a different
No.
perspective, very short. Because I visited Mohamedou through all of this, and there were times, I would see him go out and pray, or he'd turn the television up, and that was my clue that he was going off to pray. And there was a time when he didn't pray all day, and I asked him, and his response, much like in the movie, was, you become religious now. And I said, no, but I'm worried about you if you're not praying. And he said, it's hard to have faith here.
Mhm.
And I knew that he was depressed, and it was a very bad time for him.
Mhm. Would you like to add anything, Kevin? Otherwise, I have a question for you lined up.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything to add.
So a question
Can you
I have,
hear me now, by the way? Can you hear
Yeah.
me better? I turned the volume
Yeah.
up. Sorry about earlier.
no
My volume
problem.
was quiet.
So if you watch films about lawyers, if you have generally in the end scene, you have a killer closing argument, To Kill a Mockingbird style, where the lawyer steps up and is able to defend the client. And your film ends the high point is very different. It's Mohamedou speaking. It's not Jodie Foster playing Nancy giving a closing argument. Could you tell me a little bit about why that choice was made, and were you cognizant of wanting to make it? Was it because you wanted Mohamedou's voice to be the center? Is there other reasons that went into how you portrayed lawyering in this movie versus other films that portray lawyering?
Yeah, well, yes, you're absolutely right. I saw the film really as Mohamedou trying to find, the whole story is him trying to be heard, trying to be listened to, trying to get people to take him seriously. And so that climax in the courtroom, for me, was not about the nuance of the law. It was about him having finally the opportunity in front of an audience of people who are listening. Obviously, ironically, it's on a TV screen in the court, which is actually what it was. He wasn't there, but still, this was his moment to be heard. And it's obviously, the speech is very close to what Mohamedou actually said. And it's the point where I suppose he gets to be polemical. It's the only point in the movie where his character gets to say, this is who I am and this is what I feel, unmediated by anything else. And that's a very dangerous thing to do in any movie, because speeches can feel really boring and really kind of overly serious. So I think that it's a tribute particularly to Tahar Rahim, who's such a great actor, that he managed to make that speech so emotional and so real feeling and so human. And particularly because actually it was the very first thing we shot with him. For various pragmatic reasons. We were meant to shoot some things with Jodie Foster and but Jodie was sick. She couldn't be there, so he had to do that on his very first day. And I think he did a remarkable job. But yes, that's the reason why we ended with that. And in terms of the lawyering, it felt to me like the point of the movie, which I think a lot of people don't get, is it's not to say whether Mohamedou is innocent or guilty, and is he, which one of these lawyers is going to win. That's how it starts, but it very quickly becomes something else. It becomes a character portrait of him and a portrait of what his experience in Guantanamo was. So in a way, having victory or failure at the end was irrelevant in some way, and that goes against obviously the way that this genre of film is meant to go. But I'm hoping that by that stage people are so invested in him as a character and in the injustice that they have seen perpetrated against him, that they don't really care about the nuances of the law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So speaking, I have a question that is, it's somewhat legal in nature, but if you all have thoughts on it as well, I'd love to hear your input, because I think the norms and the constitutional norms that were set and were threatened by some of the crises that followed the war on terror, I think are of concern to all of us, not just those who study the law. And my question is, a lot of the discussion in the law is about precedent. Precedent can protect people's rights. It can also erode them. It's been, believe it or not, nearly 20 years, 17 to be exact, since Rasul v. Bush and Hamdi v. Rumsfeld, when the Supreme Court ruled that foreign nationals and US citizens in Guantanamo Bay had due process rights to challenge their detention. Given the time we've seen to see the impact of these decisions, their implementation, are you more or less hopeful now about the state of our constitutional doctrines, our norms of due process, and the precedent that the various Guantanamo cases have set and what they mean for the future?
Well, let me talk about that a little bit. Obviously, the court came down hard on the Bush administration. You can't just send people to an island and say, no law, the Geneva Convention doesn't apply. We can torture them, we can do whatever we want. There'll never be any lawyers here. And slowly but surely that got eroded through Rasul and Hamdi and ultimately Boumediene. But even after Boumediene, which in 2008, which said that the government actually had to respond to the habeas cases, it's been eroded a lot. And a lot of what we won in Guantanamo, we then lost, which is why Mohamedou sat there for 6 years, because the Court of Appeals made some very bad decisions. However, it's a constant fight to have due process. It's a constant fight to have the law be fair and for people to feel like it's fair. And since we're talking about Muslims and Mohamedou, I have a client who recently pled guilty to a case, in a case had nothing to do with terrorism, had to do with jewelry, but I would have tried that case and I believe we could have won. There were several defendants, it was a whole family, but all we needed was one juror to say, there's a lot of money involved here, which there was, and where's it going? And they're all Palestinian, and that's all we needed was one juror. And we all were afraid to try that case. We should not be afraid to try a case. At the end of that case, after the pleas, which turned out to be okay, nobody went to jail. The judge asked me, the federal judge said, Ms. Hollander, why do you think your clients were targeted? And I told him, I stood up and I said, because they're Muslim, which I had not had a chance to say in that case. So yes, we've had these problems in this country from the beginning. You know, Indians didn't get the right to vote until what, 1924? The people who were here first. And I mean, we've had the issue with slavery, we have it with Muslims. We have it whenever you define a crime by a group. And Mohamedou and I both talk about this. The crime of terrorism is not a crime that we should even have. That's where this starts to go wrong. It's always a political crime. And so we should, if we can get rid of it somehow, we don't want to add domestic terrorism for these right-wing guys. We want to charge them with what they did. We charge people with what they did. We don't make it a group of ethnicity or religion or whatever it is. So we've made progress and we haven't. For the people who are in Guantanamo who are charged with crimes now, including my client, confrontation doesn't apply. Since when did we have a court in this country? It's different in other countries, where the right to confrontation doesn't apply. Even Justice Scalia says it goes back how many years? He went back to Pliny the Younger or something like that in the Crawford decision. And they don't have the right. That case against my client, if it ever gets tried, which I doubt it will ever get there, there is, I think, last count, 73 hearsay witnesses.
Mhm.
No person is going to come in and say, this is what he did. And it doesn't matter. It's not clear whether due process matters. That case is going up now, whether it even applies. So we've made some progress, but until we deal with the issues in Guantanamo, until we deal with the fact that we have a alleged court system that doesn't follow any of the Constitution, we don't make progress. So on the one hand we do, and on the other hand we don't. On the other hand, we got to keep going. We have the power to make this change. And as lawyers and as young lawyers, you have tremendous power. You need to use it for change and good. That's my soapbox, sorry.
Thank you. Do either of you have anything you want to add about how you feel our sort of norms of liberty due process are today? If not, I can move on to the next question.
Yeah, sure. So, one time I was sitting in an interrogation room, Mohsen, and the first sergeant Charlie told me, your only way out is to cooperate with us and cut a deal, because you won't have any chance in an American court. They just look at your face, look at your orange jumpsuit, they will convict you. And he was right. I have no chance in an American court. Almost like Muslims who were like charged with terrorism crime, almost 100% conviction rate, 100%. Can you believe that you, Mohsen, if the FBI decides to come to you today and say you're a terrorist, 100% you will be convicted. This is so scary that to feel that I have to pray every day. This is so in a free society. And no, I don't think that precedent plays any role, because the American system, as I understand it, it's democratic. I understand that, the rule of law. But the rule of law only works if the executive power cooperates with the court system. But after 9/11, at least that's what I know, the executive power does not cooperate with the judiciary. Actually, they do everything to go away from the judicial system. And we saw that when Trump came, he said, Guantanamo must be open. And he, this executive order, one executive order, override the other. That's where is precedent, There is no continuity in the system. It's not like, oh, okay, Guantanamo and move on and better fight, crimes. No, they say we go back, and they make laws. They make laws to defeat, whatever court, says. At least that's my thought.
Thank you. So one question I have is about accountability, or the lack thereof. The torture program, as we all know, the Obama administration declined to prosecute anyone involved. And the previous, as a result, you have people very much still a part of our leadership who were part of this program. The previous CIA director, Gina Haspel, ran a black site where torture occurred. And most important for our discussion here at UC Berkeley Law, Professor John Yoo wrote the very thinly reasoned but destructive torture memos, which the Bush administration used to provide a legal rationale for the torture of detainees in violation of federal law and the Geneva Convention. These memos said things like torture that may not be allowed by federal law could be used by interrogators in overseas areas, that indefinite detention and denial of habeas corpus was appropriate. So what do you all make of the role of the torture memos in this entire issue? And what do you make of the fact that people like that John Yoo is a professor at this university? And what should accountability look like?
Is that
Nancy, I think
mine?
that's for you. I think that's yours.
Well, one could say that President Obama, in saying we're only going to look forward, violated the law because the U.S. is a signatory to the Convention Against Torture, and the Convention Against Torture says torture can never be used under any circumstance. It also says that anyone who is a torturer should be prosecuted, and that anyone who is the recipient of the torture should receive damages. Of course, none of that has happened. None of that has happened. And, you know, as a criminal defense lawyer, when Obama said that, I thought, well, maybe I'll use that. Maybe I'll go into court and say, oh, Your Honor, don't worry about what my client did. We're just going to look forward. It makes no sense. And it's wrong. You know, I'm a defense lawyer, not a prosecutor. But if we're going to follow the law and stop this from happening again, we do have to have accountability. That's what the International Criminal Court is all about, that we're not a member of. You know, we do have to, we know who they are. If they violated the law, and the torture memos are not the law anymore, fortunately, if they violated the law, then they should be prosecuted. End of story.
If Mohamedeu, if you know, John Yoo were here listening, was there be anything that you'd want to say to him or other individuals who were complicit in the torture program?
First, I think John Yoo could make a lot of money if he's an advisor to an Arab dictator or a Middle Eastern dictator, because in a free society, someone who condone and design program to justify war crimes and torture. This is like after 9/11, America declared itself as a fascist nation. They said American citizens have rights. Anybody else has no right. That's what Italian, you know, fascism said, that Italian people are special. You know, they deserve human rights that no one else deserves. And that's what German says. Hitler said that the race of, you know, whatever that means, like the Aryan, that we know this means nothing. But he said that that race deserves certain rights that no one else deserves. And the problem is, because this is not for American people. And torture must be abolished. It doesn't matter. The discussion in America is disgusting. The discussion in America, even by liberals, says, okay, does it produce intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Does it produce information? What you guys discussing about? This is to discuss about, you know, torturing people. You know, and you say, the question is only whether Mohammed, if I torture him, will tell me the ticking bomb. You know, this is like, you know, I mean, I don't understand this type. This is make me want to throw up.
Well, I appreciate your response to that very much. We've gotten to the portion of the event where we'd like to have some question and answer. So please submit some questions via the Q&A box. For those, if you don't answer anonymously, we'll be able to even pull you to the stage so that you can ask it directly. So please be prepared to do that. I'll call on you and then ask you to read your question if after you've submitted it. Otherwise, if you do so anonymously, I'll read the questions. One question I have for Kevin right before we begin the question and answer is, so you're the individual here who was looking at this from a third perspective, because Nancy and Mohamedeu this was their life, they lived this. What would you say surprised you the most when you were beginning the research of this film? And was there anything that you were not able to squeeze into the runtime of the film that you really wish you could?
Well, what surprised me, but it shouldn't have surprised me, was how incredibly complex the case was, and how complex Nancy's journey legally was. And we obviously, in the movie, when you have 2-hour runtime, you need to make everything very simple. You need to, you need to reduce things to archetypes. And so it's the challenge was trying to find a way to make the legal journey of the film accessible to a mainstream audience, because obviously we're trying to reach as wide an audience as possible. We're trying to make an entertainment film as well as making a film that has a strong moral and political point. But trying to find a way to present, just the idea of what is habeas to an audience, a general audience, is quite difficult. And finding the wording that Jodie Foster would use when she explains the concept to Mohamedeu in the cell, and try to keep it, to as few words as possible that people wouldn't glaze over. That sort of stuff was very hard. But there was a lot of things as well that we wanted to include, particularly, I think, from Mohamedou's earlier life in Germany, and he was in Canada, and obviously in Mauritania. There was also the whole period, which is really when Nancy and Mohamedeu became close, the whole period after the habeas case. So between 2009 and 2016, when Mohamedeu is released, which was when Terry Duncan and Nancy used to go every couple of months to spend time with Mohamedeu and just kind of hang out, because there was not much, I think, if I'm right in saying, there wasn't a lot of lawyering to be done. It was about companionship and for Mohamedeu to sort of feel something of the world. So I think that period is a period you could make a whole other movie about. You could also make a whole other movie about Mohamedou's friendship with Steve Wood, who was one of his guards, which is a fascinating story, and they're still in touch. And Steve went to see Mohamedeu a couple of years ago in Mauritania, and he's been part of the publicizing of the film. So yeah, there's a lot of things, but movies are reductive and simplistic.
I will say, as a law student, understanding habeas is very confusing too. So I can empathize.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
It is very, very confusing. So one question that came in from the audience is for Mohamedeu. What was the first thing you did when you got home?
The very first thing. So I came 2 p.m. They took me to the police station. Then I slept. I wanted to sleep. I didn't care what they did. I just want to sleep, because the trip was so much pain. They trapped a chair, blindfolded me, put earmuffs on my ears, and then it was so much pain. I just kept suffering, I don't know, 12 hours, I think. And I just want to sleep. And then they took me to my family. You saw the scene. That actually, when I came, and then I don't know where I am. Everything is different. I'm disorientated. And then they took me to a hotel, and the first I touched my home to read what is for what, because I was never allowed to touch my medicine. They only give me a pill, take it or leave it. And I went to a room. Then but I didn't want to sleep. I want to be awake all day long, 24/7, to catch up on the almost 20 years that I lost.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started to look up for the song that the guard used to play, like DMX, Rihanna, I think her name. And then looking for like very weird movies, like Polish movies, because I didn't have access to TV, but they have certain station. One of them is Polish. Then I looked for Polish movies. I didn't understand anything, but that's what I did.
That's a great answer. So I'm gonna try and call someone up real quick. Adnan, you had a question? Do you mind unmuting yourself and sharing what you wanted to ask?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have my first question that I wrote was for Nancy, and it was, thank you all for being here, by the way. I really appreciate it. I love the movie. How did you know you wanted to work on civil rights defense and particularly with people in Guantanamo? And what are the things that you think that young lawyers should know that are kind of unexpected that people don't talk about when you're starting out?
Well, I went to law school to be a criminal defense lawyer. I had no other interest in, I suppose, civil rights, and I've done civil rights cases too, but I had no other interest. Don't ask me to write a contract or prepare interrogatories or any of that, because I can't do them. I have no interest in doing it. That's why I went to law school. I come out of a background as a there's a Arabic word, mushabiba, I have to look at it. It means agitator. Mushabiba, right? Say it again.
Yeah, you said it correct.
Mushabia. Well, that's what a friend of mine calls me, and you know, I was an activist my whole life. I worked for the ACLU, and this is all I wanted to do. What I tell young lawyers is somewhat of what I just said, and that is to never you have to follow precedent in this country in the law, but never be burdened by it. Don't feel like you're bound to it. If people had felt bound to it, we wouldn't have had Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, because we'd still have segregated schools. That was the law. You know, we wouldn't have lawyers for people who have felonies, because that wasn't the law until Gideon. You've got to feel like you can always change the law and make it better for more people, and not be afraid to just, you know, write what you believe the law should be. And the other thing that I think it always mystifies me. People say, well, you have to speak one way to juries and one way to judges. And I don't agree with that. Judges are people. They have emotions and backgrounds and prejudices, and you have to tell your story. We're storytellers. Just make sure you're always thinking about how to tell your story with the facts so that you can persuade people and do good. We can do good and make change. And I believe that's what we should do.
Thank you for that answer. I want to call up Professor Laura Fletcher, who has a question. She's the director of the International Human Rights Clinic about Berkeley. She has a question for Mohamedeu. So I'm going to press allow to talk here. Ask you to unmute yourself, Professor Fletcher.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Mohamedeu for being with us today and for sharing your story. I just am so moved, and it's so important, particularly for some of the reasons as the moderator suggested about Berkeley Law and our, you know, as an institution, we have a relationship to all of this that is, that is both indirect, but also directly touches each one of us in our institutional identity and affiliation with Berkeley Law. So for all of those reasons, thank you for bringing your perspective here. My question is, I wrote a book with Eric Stover, who directs the Human Rights Center, and I direct the clinic. And we did a 2-year study, excuse me, of former Guantanamo detainees, and we interviewed over 60 from several different countries, trying to learn about their experiences, both of detention, of abduction and detention, and then also what happened after. Because so much of the focus had been just on the experience of Guantanamo and then not very much about what happens afterwards. One of the themes that came through, because we asked, what are your attitudes towards the United States, and what does justice look like for you? And at that time, and we published the book just as President Obama had won his first term in office. And so there was a lot of hope about what his administration might do. And at that time, the former detainees uniformly said, I harbor no ill will. What I want for myself, I want my life back. It's such a very simple request given everything that they had been through. And I wonder, your detention was so much longer. I just wondered if you could share what your feelings are about what does justice look like for you at this point? And again, thank you.
Question.
First, thank you so much, Laurel, for the work you do and for the book. I'm going to look up for the book and read it. And I decided to forgive, honestly, because there is no benefit coming to me if anyone suffer. Of course, it's better like for some kind of justice to be done. And I just like other detainees, I too just want my life back, but that's not easy because I'm still, subject to punishment and to this circular argument. I deserve to be in Guantanamo Bay, even though I was never convicted of any crime, even charged. And I can tell you that this experience showed me, the ugly face of prison, kidnapping, but it shows me the beautiful face of America. I give you, the example of my lawyers are American. They are the one who defended me and who spent their money to defend me. And I give you another example, very far from me. Dali War. Dali War is a taxi driver in Afghanistan. He was kidnapped and tortured to death. He didn't even make it to Guantanamo Bay. And the military wanted to, sweep look at him and they wrote homicide. This guy was killed. That's America too. So, and I know this, and I'm so happy to get to know those beautiful people from the United States of America. And when we criticize the United States of America, it doesn't mean that we don't know what African and Arab dictators are doing. We only hope that America as a democracy engages more in human rights defense as opposed to human rights crushing and human rights violation.
Thank you. I want to call up Zainab with a lowercase z. You have a question, would you like? If you could unmute yourself and ask. If not, I can read your question.
Hi, sorry, it took me a second to unmute myself, but thank you, all of you, so much for being here. This is just so outstanding, and thank you for being generous with your time. My question is more as a young aspiring lawyer who's always, hoped in some form to do national security defense type of work. I'm wondering both what you see as the main barriers to doing that type of work right now, and what advice you might have for someone who wants to do it.
Well, I take that's for me. I fell into it, and it wasn't what I ever planned to do. And then I represented someone charged with espionage and got a security clearance. And then the Holy Land case came along, which took years and did not have a good result, and some other cases. And the Guantanamo, we learned about Guantanamo, and I wanted to do Guantanamo cases. And I don't know how to actually tell you to get involved in it. You could try starting with the Guantanamo cases. There's still some there. There's probably still some that need some help. But otherwise, I really don't know. There aren't very many national security cases. There aren't very many of us defense lawyers who actually have security clearance. We're a pretty small group, actually. But there are people, and you can write to me and I can talk to you more about it, the people who are really doing a lot of this, who maybe you could clerk for, perhaps, or do some contract work with to begin with, since it depends on where you are in law school. But just send me an email. I'm really easy to find. I'm happy to talk to you about who to maybe contact to get more involved in the national security work.
Thank you so
Can I-
much. Go for it.
Mohsen? So I realize I'm not a lawyer. No one is asking me any legal question, and that makes me very upset. And what
Okay.
what makes me even more
Any-
upset? Yeah, what makes me more upset that people, DMing me, so many young people from the Arab world, from Europe, from the USA, from Canada. So, oh my God, I love this movie. I want to be a lawyer like Nancy. I'm not Nancy, man. And not a single person, guy or a girl, told me, I want to be like you. I want to be kidnapped, tortured, and schlepped to Guantanamo. And that pisses me off.
Well, any
It
of these
pisses
questions that you
pisses you off that nobody wants to be like you?
Yes, it does.
Why would we? We don't want.
I would love the writing.
14 years in prison.
The writing skills is something I think everyone, whether you're interested in law or not, that gift you have. We have a question from Nadia. I'm going to ask to unmute. Could you ask the question?
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you everyone for being here. I watched the movie last night and it was so powerful and moving for me to see that. So my question is, from my perspective as a 2L who's interested in going into public defense work, how do you recommend responding to people who come at you with questions like, how do you feel defending guilty people, and make snarky comments like that?
Yes, and comments that we get all the time in our life. Look, it's not your job as a lawyer. It's not my job as a lawyer to judge anyone. My job as a lawyer, as Jody said in the movie, is to make sure that the laws in this country are followed, to make sure the prosecutor is honest, that the case is done correctly, that my client gets the benefit of everything he or she's entitled to under the Constitution. And if a jury finds my client guilty and everything has been fair, then they're entitled to that verdict. but it's not up to me to make that judgment. And I won't. And I know it's hard for people to understand because I'm not defending guilty people. I'm defending people accused of something. They're not guilty when I start defending them. They have a presumption of innocence, and I will follow that and make sure that that stays until the very end of the case, all the way to the end. And that's the prosecution's obligation. So when you start a case, just tell people this. Tell people I'm not defending guilty people. I'm defending people who've been accused of a crime, and I'm going to give that person their everything that they're entitled to under the law. And good luck. So it won't stop them.
Thank you. We have an anonymous question that Waleed is going to read for us.
Hi, yeah. This question is for Kevin. First off, I wanted to say it was a phenomenal film. The directing was great and the performances by the actors were truly moving. My question specifically is, did you ever worry, particularly with American audiences, that they would struggle to empathize with Mohamedeu? And is this something that you discussed with the actors? Or did you feel that this story was so riveting that this would resonate with audiences regardless?
Well, thank you very much for your positive comments about the film. You know, I didn't worry so much about that until we were shooting the film, funnily enough. And I remember talking to Tahar one stage when we were filming a sequence of him talking to another prisoner through the fence. And he's so charming in some of those scenes. And I suddenly dawned on me, this could be very challenging for an American audience to see this. And obviously I'm not American, I'm British, so I'm looking at this from a different perspective. But I did start to worry about that. But of course, that is also why, one of the reasons why we chose not just to tell the story of Mohamedeu in the prison. First of all, I thought, if the whole movie was set in Guantanamo, in cells and in interrogation rooms, it would become boring, I think, for people. Mm-hmm. And there are not many relationships that Mohamedeu, obviously drama is all about relationships and seeing how relationships change people. And the relationships that Mohamedeu had in prison were many, but they were very uniform in their power structure, if I put it like that. So to have Terry and Nancy represented in the film gave us an opportunity to have a different kind of relationship. And, but also it gave us a chance to have an outside perspective on this. And obviously one of the things that's been very interesting to me is the response to the film about the role that Benedict Cumberbatch plays, Stuart Couch. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many people complain to me that, you know, why is there not a villain in this movie? Why is Benedict Cumberbatch not a villain? Why is he not a bad guy? You know, why is he an American who realizes he's wrong and, you know, is redeemed in some way? And somehow they feel that that's a sellout. To me, I feel like that's partly the point. It's to say that if you look at people as individuals, as Mohamedeu does in his book, and it's one of the things that's very moving, his conversations with his guards and with interrogators, looking at them as individuals. Not many people are bad. Not many people are really bad people. They're doing what they're doing because they think it's the right thing. And I wanted to show to a Republican audience, to a military audience, that here's a representative, one of your own, Stuart Couch, who stood up and did the right thing when he realized what was happening. And that this isn't actually about the kind of ridiculous kind of binary nature in which American politics seems to take place, you know, these days. This is about human values, which should reach beyond which party you belong to. Does that answer the question? Maybe in a very roundabout way.
I think that answers great. We have a time for maybe one more question. There's a question here. I'm gonna invite Alia up if you could answer real quick or ask the question, and then maybe we'll try and squeeze one more in before we wrap up. If not, I can ask it if you're unable to speak. Okay, I'll ask the question. This is for Nancy specifically. How did you find the motivation when there was so much antagonism? And I think there's a scene in the film in which, you know, this is taking place in 2003, 2002, only a couple years after 9/11. Like, was it personally challenging? Was it challenging for your attorneys on your staff?
If you mean by challenging that we were concerned about ourselves, no. You know, somebody's gonna say something or write something. I ultimately was only afraid of my government, afraid to travel out of the country and come back into the country, and what might happen in that case. I still worry about that. But we just delved into it. We decided this is what we were going to do. Terry was there from the very beginning. At the beginning, she was my associate, then my law partner, and now she's a death penalty lawyer. She's not anything like how she's portrayed in the movie. She's a brilliant, learned counsel in death penalty cases. But the challenge was the constant fight. The constant fight at Guantanamo. The rules kept changing. You know, we wanted to stay there all day and have lunch with Mohamedeu. We had to get special permission to do that. At one point, I was visiting Mohamedeu and Ibrahim, and I was told I'd have to go off the island and come back on before I could switch from one to the other. At one point, after I left Mohamedeu, I was in the car with one of the paralegals on my way to visit Ibrahim, and we get a phone call and they say, is Nancy Hollander there? Yes. Well, who are you with? And this person says, you know, she's with me. And he said, well, we can't have lawyers just roaming around on their own. I mean, how ridiculous is that? We get searched all the time. The prosecutors just walk right in. You know, things like that that really, really annoy me. But the big challenge in Mohamedeu's case, it was true in the Holy Land case, it's true to some extent in every criminal case, is getting what you need to defend the case. And that was the big challenge, you know, and going there and having to spend a week there, which is what we did. We had to spend, sorry, someone just called my watch. We have to spend a week there every time. I mean, you go there and you fly in on Sunday night and or Monday, and then you get to Guantanamo on Monday morning and you leave on Thursday or Friday. It's not like, oh, I'll just change my plans. And, you know, things happen there, visits are cut off. I mean, it was really, it still is a very challenging place, now even more so with COVID. But those were the kinds of challenges we had. We just dealt with them and kept going.
I'm going to try and squeeze in one last question, if you all don't mind, don't have to run anywhere. Lizzie, would you like to come up on the stage, unmute yourself and ask the question? Otherwise, I can ask it for you. Lizzie? She had a question about what was the book publishing and writing process like while you were still there? I think this is a question for Mohamedeu.
I think Nancy can answer this question much better, but I can tell you that it took almost 8 years for the government to accept to publish the book with the reductions they did. So it was a very lengthy process, stifling. And but thank God, in the end, it was published, and Nancy took care of everything, everything. It was published when I was in prison, and I had the contract to the movie when I was in prison too. She signed everything.
I signed Mohamedou's name a lot of times, but we didn't even have a real power of attorney, because although he gave me one, there's no notary in Guantanamo. So, you know, I just decided he'd given me an oral power of attorney, and I signed all these contracts.
All right. Any last things any of you all would like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Only that in my role as the crass filmmaker here, only that if you did enjoy the movie, tell other people about it, and we want to get the movie seen. Obviously, that's important.
Yeah, I would totally echo that. I was very moved by the movie, and I think it was phenomenal. I want to thank you all. We're virtual. We can't give you the rousing round of applause we would have given you at Berkeley Law, but I'm sure it would be very loud if we could all hear. But I want to thank each of our panelists for their time and their generosity with it. The Mauritanian is available to own on digital on April 20th, 2021, video on demand on May 4th, 2021, and on Blu-ray DVD on May 11th, 2021. This recording will be shared with anyone who missed it. But thank you all, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
And it's available right now on Amazon Prime to rent.
Right, that's how I watched it. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real privilege and honor for me. Each of you. It was, I think your answers were terrific, and I think everyone I spoke with was so moved by the film. So
that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lawyers. Become great lawyers. Bye.
We'll try.
Yes.
Take care, Kevin.
Do good.
Figure out.
Mohamedou, bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Assalamu alaikum.